Hey, the campaign's over, but we have a lot to say about it. Find out this week on the Hapless Heroes. Hi, everybody. It's me, Francesco, one of the hosts and DMs of the Hapless Heroes podcast. Tonight, we're just going to do a bit of reminiscing, a bit of recollecting, a bit of reminding ourselves what the fuck happened these last 6.5 years in this campaign, as well as potentially set some expectations about, what next season might look like without spoiling anything for you. I'm going to introduce all my friends here sitting with me. I got Dave with me here.
Hey, guys.
We got Mike.
Hello.
We got Nicole.
Oh God, how do I introduce myself when I'm playing myself?
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh my God, what do I say?
We got Zach.
The next campaign is going to be all minions.
We got Phil.
It's been real.
And we got John.
I really do want to do a Muppet Born campaign.
A Muppet Born.
Yes.
So,
half
I'm just
Muppet,
gonna-
half minion.
So I'm just going to be completely honest. Like this episode, like we don't have necessarily a plan for it, but I just want to kind of like just take a moment to acknowledge the last 6.5 years of this show and like how far it's like come and like what it has become now, where it's going to be, and just kind of how we got here. Because like this is
crazy going back and re-listening. Because I do that every once in a while, and I just started one this year, so it's like every day I go to the gym and I listen to the podcast. So I'm on like episode 50.5, which is Enter the Frogman.
It's the best one, in my humble opinion. Like one of the best ones we've ever done.
But the audio quality, the jump, that was huge. Like all the other things that came with that.
Yeah,
I do like it when we stopped recording with only one mic overhead.
Me too. That was an adventure. I have to say, like, yeah, because that's the thing, right? Like this podcast, right? This season, quote unquote, I'm using heavy air quotes here because this season was just one campaign, right? We didn't split it up into seasons. It was just one campaign over 6.5 years as season one, quote unquote.
Season one.
But like
2016 through 2023.
It's also like a time capsule of our lives, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like because like
there have
so
been,
much.
how many like 4 marriages of
various
cast members?
During the time that we did this podcast, I met, dated, married my wife, and we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary in November.
I
4 different apartments. 4.
Right. As I say, I just for a little self-disclosure, right? Like I got married, I got divorced, still best friends with my ex-wife, by the way, I should say, just to clarify for everybody listening. Like Katie, she was in a couple of episodes, like in the early days, and my God, those were some of the funniest little things because she had no idea what was going on. She's never played D&D before, right? And it was just like so fucking funny just to see her like just pick it up. She was just like, what do you want me to say? I was like, I don't know, just wing it. It's what we're doing. Right?
I had never played the game at all
so
before
great.
this podcast.
Right. Half the people here had never played the game before this. Well, so half the people who we started with had never played before, ever. And so we had no idea what we were doing.
I have not gone back and listened to early episodes, but I would be listening to myself just learning how to play the game, period.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is what really intrigued people too, is that we really did kind of hash out like the how-tos of the management of the game and how things were rolling. And as you guys had questions, we were able to kind of like talk through that. And I think that really intrigued a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think, not to spoil anything, but I think we may be able to kind of like rehash a little bit of that feeling in our next campaign.
Yeah. Again, without saying too much. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy, right? And then like, I met Nicole along the way during the recording of this podcast or whatever. Like we had played D&D together. We've been friends for a while, right? And we kind of started seeing each other. And well, I was like, hey, you're really good at D&D. Do you want to be on this show that I'm doing? I know it's like a lot of pressure to ask you to now suddenly, make yourself a somewhat public figure. because you joined us, I think it was like during the pandemic, right? Like kind of right when that kicked off.
Yeah, very, very early.
Very shortly
in the
after,
pandemic, I think.
Like shortly after we started doing remote recording sessions, right? I think we brought you in to play Boris, who was, I should say real quick, right, as sort of as part of our reminiscing here, right? Boris the Butcher was just like a character that was an accident, right? Because like I had intended way back when for Boris the Butcher, like when they turned around to just be like, some short in stature, like a halfling or a gnome or something, like just someone who didn't like look the part. But then James, right before I was able to finish my sentence, just said, I said, you turn around and you see, and he's like a 12-year-old girl. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, actually, sure. It's a 12-year-old girl. And
we shocking amount of our campaign has been defined by things blurted out in the pauses between shit Fran says.
Yep.
Yeah.
And part of me playing Boris as well was because when you had asked me about coming to play a character in the podcast, it was because you guys were wrapping up the storyline and you just wanted me to play something for this short mini arc in these last like half dozen episodes.
How many years later?
How many times?
Note.
Yeah, how many times during the course?
We were a couple weeks away from ending the campaign for like 2.5 years.
I wasn't going to make a character for that, right? I'm just going to play this. Like, we'll bring back this NPC. It'll be a fun little, riff. I had another character in a different campaign that I had just wrapped up that was, similar. And we were like, yeah, we can kind of like fuse them and like, yeah, it's good. We'll play this.
I remember a conversation exactly a year ago where I said, "Hey, Fran, like I'm taking on this new role at the school. When do you think we're going to be wrapping up?" He's like, "Oh, probably around July." I was like, "Great,
end of the month, easy,
perfect."
Yeah,
that would align perfectly with life. Here it is.
I remember like
March.
I remember like October 2019. I was like, "When is this campaign again end?" And he was like, "Yeah, probably by like January."
Really soon.
Yeah.
If only I knew.
I think somewhere along the way,
still here, so obviously it was something fun.
Yeah, Fran and I had this conversation in one of our behind the screen channels, and it was like, oh yeah, we should be done by the end of the year, and I'm like, okay, we have this list of things that we have to check off of these Chekhov's guns that are on the wall.
So we actually have like a pinned post in like our little private channel where it's like essentially every story thread, right, that was left unresolved. We just cataloged them all into like one big list. So it's like, we need to be able to essentially cross out as many of these as we can to actually like end this show, because we've like put so many plot threads out there. Like we still didn't even probably hit everything.
Oh no, right? And there's ones we absolutely never even remembered to put on.
Which I guarantee probably over the course of the next few weeks, right before our mailbag episode, like I know I've already seen some of those questions coming in about like just like some of those things. It's like there's stuff that we just could not get.
Who is the mob boss? That was so long ago.
Razi, the devil.
Whatever happened to him?
Also, we have to assume now that there's just buried treasure somewhere in the land of the frost.
Yes, there is. There is.
Buried treasure is just there, which don't worry. Actually, that's a great idea. If the plan, never mind. Everything that's there and unresolved is still there.
It's still there.
We're trying so hard not to spoil anything for next season because we already have a lot of ideas of like what direction we're going to take things. So like we don't want to get too in the weeds of that or commit too much to anything like on air right now in this episode, just in case there's a lot of that subject to change. So we don't want to start putting that stuff out there and get y'all hyped for something that might look completely different by the time we actually sit down and start recording it.
Right.
But that's how excited we are.
Yes, we're so excited though.
All I'll say is that there will be commemorative cups.
I can't commit to that, but I think we have mugs actually on our merch store, which I always forget to plug and tell people that exists. But we do actually have a merch store. It's on Spreadshirt.
Can we throw some custom designs up there that just say that has like a mug that just says #taste it on it?
Why the fuck not? Actually, why the fuck not?
I'll give you a design for that one.
Yeah, let's get a good font for it, and we'll slap it on a mug or something.
I threw up the mock-up of Morton is Gorgeous t-shirts.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, the thing is like people, I don't know, it's just like we've had such a weird, like, and that's the thing I want to kind of also address, right, is that like, we've built up kind of like this weird, like, not going to say weird, but just this cult following almost, I guess we'd liken it to, like, for this show, right, because again, like, we're not one of the big D&D podcasts out there or anything like that, but we're just, we're putting out content and people are fucking listening to it. We've had people tattoo our podcast's logo on their bodies. Like,
that's crazy.
Reach that level of fame.
That's so
right?
cool.
Yeah, quote unquote. Yeah. But like, and which, I mean, shout out to what was it? Whack Job. Well, that was his former name in Discord. Bulldog Timmy, I think, is his name now because he's also a streamer. So I think that's like he's like kind of his socials to match that now.
It's called nurturing the brand, Fran.
Fessy, our community manager, right? One of our community mods in our Discord server also got our tattoo. I got a tattoo on his body.
It's so
like
cool.
It's just you guys are nuts. I love you. Just want to say that.
Fran and Dave, since you two are the hosts, I think that means that you should get tattoos of Bulldog Timmy and Thessie on your bodies.
Is that what that means?
That's how that works.
I didn't sign up for this.
Fair is fair.
I think you donned the host cap.
I don't think that's how that works, but that's cool if you think that. But if I look at the trajectory of our podcast too, because like, okay, if you look at the very first adventure, right, that we had was actually one that I adapted from an adventure I found on the DMs Guild, right, which is that resource that you can just people like write stuff like whether it's custom rule sets and things like that, custom classes, adventures, whatever it is. And I believe it was Author DM, I think, who did that. Hold on, let me just make sure I'm crediting the person properly because it's been so long. I remember we credited them in the episode, but I took that adventure and I adapted it essentially, right, to like just like as like a good introductory thing for everybody because it was just cute, like as a boy and his Modron, right?
Yeah.
And when it came time to like getting towards essentially our the conclusion of this campaign, like I wanted to kind of bring things back around to involve the Modrons, right? Like of sort of bring things full circle, right? To like like why 31 Squared's appearance here in the March of the Modrons and all that stuff like that was like hinted at or whatever. Like I wanted to make that mean something besides just being a cute little adventure we started on. I think it was good to just kind of tip of the hat to our humble beginnings as a show, as a group of people playing D&D and and all that stuff because it was just so different. And I'm sorry, it was his name is Anthony. I'm pulling up the link to the module, but yeah, you can still find it on the DMs Guild. It's literally called A Boy and His Modron, and it's a fun one to run like a new group of players through. Honestly, it's just so cute, and you can kind of see what liberties we took and things like that. But I remember the author of that even posted on their like little DMs Guild page, like, "Hey, like the Hapless Heroes ran this." Same with the guy we used Igor's Challenge. Like I adapted Igor's Challenge from as well. I asked him, I was like, hey, do you mind if we like actually run this adventure in our podcast? Because this looks like a fuckload of fun. And he's like, hell yeah, dude. Like, let me know when the episode goes online. Like, I want to listen to it. He's like, I want to hear, he's like, I want to hear who plays, I want to hear how people play through this thing.
I forget, did we end up just pronouncing dude's name as Testicles or did we just leave it as Testicles?
Testicles. I'll never forget Testicles as the character because it's spelled the same way. And it's so like as soon as I saw, so like when I read it and listen, if Author DM, right, if that guy is still listening to our podcast today, if you're listening to this right now, my guy, I'm sorry. Like I'm sure you meant Testicles. But like
through the hapless filter.
It passed through the hapless filter, and then suddenly this character was Testicles. The man with a very vague
testicles.
Yes, with a very vague Slavic accent that I kept making
Eastern
sound,
European
that I kept like sliding into German every time. Like I would do it for an extended period of time because I can't really do like a Eastern European accent for an extended period without it sounding like something else.
Was the Zero sandwich, was that part of canon when we had to make Zero the sandwich?
No. Okay.
Yeah.
So if any of our Patreon subscribers may have listened to this already, but so it's one of like one of the lost episodes, from way back in the day with the single mic days, like
because it was like a test. It was like a test.
It was a tester episode.
Yeah.
Because that was the episode where James actually switched to Hoblet as his main character. Because initially he was going to be Pesca Fresca. Pesca Fresca, the fucking Dragonborn cleric or something like that.
That would have changed things so much.
Right.
So much.
But he for this like little test adventure, this like we just wanted to record it. Again, we were doing equipment tests. We were just kind of seeing how to edit. I was still learning how to like edit a podcast. I had audio engineering experience before this because I produce music and things like that. I'm like, in bands and all that shit. But like I'd never done it for just an audio podcast, and having a single microphone was one of the most frustrating experiences of my life when it came to audio editing. Especially with how many times James would slam the fucking table because he's just so animated when he talks. You know what I mean? He was just always slam the table. And so I had to then start suspending the mic over the table because we had it sitting on the table. Anyways.
Thank you. As an aside, thank you, patrons, for affording us the ability to get microphones.
And actually, that's before our Patreon. I funded all that with my own wallet, right? And then eventually, just like our Patreon money, it was able to help supplement some of like those costs, right? Because it's not cheap to get all this equipment, right?
Thanks,
but I managed to. I don't care, dude. It was my pleasure. I love this shit. So like. We had that. So this episode was a test episode. Again, James created Hoblet the Smasher. And we ran this episode where essentially Zero was sending the heroes off on, I think Dave was DMing. Zero sent the hero, our illustrious heroes, as in their early stages, off to get some sort of part. We used like a lot of there's that VX Junkies subreddit where it's like technical jargon and shit like that. And Dave just started making up a bunch of like words. Like, hey, you need to get this thing. You get it from this guy, whatever. So we went on this whole adventure. We fought a gazebo, and then we found out that this device that he wanted was just a sandwich, a submarine sandwich. That was
that what the gazebo was?
That's the first gazebo.
That was the first gazebo. But then
I didn't even know about that.
You were not there.
You were not there.
I
didn't realize there was a gazebo.
Actually, it's because you weren't able to make it that night because we were still recording our first like run of episodes. I was like, well, since Zach's not here, let's just play and record something because I'm still trying to figure this shit out anyways. So like that's why we did that session because like Joe wasn't there either, I don't think. So like we were missing both you and Joe, and so we were like, well, like we haven't actually put an episode out yet, so like I don't want to like let's just like wait for them to get back so we can record their episodes and stuff like that, and then we'll just do this thing instead. And that turned into essentially one of the bonus episodes we have up on our Patreon account.
We've made some of our best episodes. If we can't get everybody together, let's make up something random and do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because that's been a common theme, right? Like, because like again, we're not like we don't do this for a living. We all have jobs and real lives and things like that outside of this. So like,
well, that's where the interns came from.
Exactly. Yep. So like we thought like, okay, how do we, because like, there are some times where it's easy to explain a character being away. We had like the rocket, remember like the whole like rocket contraption that was strapped to Peridot's ass where he like fucking blasted towards us and found us. Like, we came up with like, that was actually, that was the first episode that I think Hedrick made his appearance in as well. I'm pretty sure it was that adventure. But so like, we would always come up with ways to like do that when that character wasn't part of like whatever story was being told. But like if someone if someone couldn't be here for a recording session and like their character was directly involved in whatever was happening, whether we were in a combat or, whatever it was, right? We're like, well, we still want to record something tonight, but we don't want to like press on without this person because like we kind of need them here to make sure that we have some kind of continuity for this encounter or whatever it is. So then the interns were born.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you mentioned the interns because that brings up a very important point. I think we can all agree, best character in the entire podcast, Spanx Mahoney.
No, that's why we killed him.
Let me mute this man.
Which I think we can all agree again.
Spanx was the one that
we've discussed is joining the pantheon of gods for the next campaign.
The actual best character, though, was also in one of those episodes where people couldn't be there. Namely, a Memorial Day where I couldn't be there, and that was the Pregnard episode.
Oh,
that's true.
Right.
Yeah, because I remember. So, like, because we did. I remember there was at one point in time where we were trying to like figure out recording sessions and things like that. And yeah, there was a day where it was like, oh shit, like some of us have this day off. Like, why don't we just like record some bonus episodes or whatever this day?
Mike had been missing, I think, for a couple episodes.
So we had to explain where Quinn had been, and so Quinn ran into the doctor and his frog. And
with Felix.
Great, right. I ran into you first, and then we
one of
this whole situation.
I might have did this the last time we did the recap, but one of the proudest moments of my life was setting up that "Can you fix my toilet" joke.
John, that remains to this day one of the best like setups, because like at the start of that episode, it was like it wasn't really clear who the DM was, right? We were all kind of just like throwing things into the soup that was like that episode, right? Of just that story. And I couldn't have been prouder of it, honestly, because like I mean, like, you know, to be a DM and to like see your players like take charge of like a story, to like really sort of like take the spotlight, like find their thing, right? And just execute, just go. Like it is one of like my proudest things, because I get to just sit here and enjoy what you're doing, right? I get to just sit here and then I can just react to whatever wacky shit you just said and decide whether or not it happens exactly the way you described it, right? And then we press on. But like it's like my favorite exchange, I think, in like the way that we've done things, right? Yeah. And I don't want to go too deep into this because I know we have some questions for our mailbag episode that I want to do a deeper dive into, because people have asked us about, like, you know, if we would do anything differently, or, you know, because if we look back in these last six and a half years. So I kind of want to save that, because I'm still kind of, there's a lot I want to say to that, and I could take up some time doing that, right? Because we've learned a lot over the last 6.5 years.
You know, give the audience some time to generate some questions too.
Also that too, right? But like, you know, I will say, like, you know, from like the humble beginnings we have, like I remember, like, you know, just trying to find ways, because of all the characters coming in and out and people not being able to be part of the show anymore and stuff like that, because like there were some absences where like we knew they were temporary, but there were some that were kind of indefinite, right? Like, cause like Joe just like really couldn't commit to doing the show anymore. He got really caught up in work and all of his stuff. And, you know, I just think that he just really couldn't find like the time to do it. And that's fine. You know,
he got the, you know, forever job he had after we started the podcast too. Like, I don't think he had,
because again,
the current job.
Time capsule of our lives. We were all much younger. We were all 6.5 years younger when we first started this, and our lives were in very different places. Right. So, you know, we couldn't really predict a lot of the changes that our lives were going to go through. And they went through a lot of things, and we managed to somehow like keep this, like, I think that it is a mark of achievement, I will say, for most D&D campaigns, right? To actually be consistent and last this long.
Have a beginning and an end, an actual.
Because like to be able to coordinate, essentially, because like, you know, we get together essentially every other Monday for the most part and record a couple episodes. Like, it's been formulaic for 6.5 years. Like the occasional like rescheduling here and there, sliding a day or two based on, again, real life things that come up. But it's just like we've always sort of stuck to that same sort of regimen. And I think I need to give everybody a lot of credit, because like, yeah, we've all had our absences and things like that, but like still, like I have to give everybody a lot of credit, because like no matter what changes we've gone through in our lives, like we've still done this thing.
Well, and I think that really goes to the credit of the duo, you know, DM.
I agree.
The fact that both of you guys got time to play a character.
Yeah.
You know, and be a part of
the
it.
concept of the dual DM worked better than we could have imagined.
And there were so many opportunities where like I know I did a run of a couple episodes, John did, and like there were so many opportunities for you guys to kind of step back and just enjoy what you had created. And that is such a cool, unique aspect of this.
Yeah. So like, I remember when we first started the show, like that was one of the core tenets I wanted to be part, because like, you know, again, we've talked about this in other recaps and other parts of the show, but like, you know, we myself, Dave, and Mike, I was running a different campaign for them at a local game store that unfortunately has since closed. RIP Jester's Cap, aka what was it? What did he Two Kings afterwards. Sorry, Jester Cap to me, because that's what I grew up with it being. But like, you know, hope you're doing well, Jay. If you're listening to this, you're an awesome dude. Thanks for giving us our start. But like, you know,
people have been listening to this.
Yeah, I guess so. But so like, I think about like what that campaign fell apart for a multitude of reasons that I've already talked about. And I don't want to rehash because it's all in the past, water under the bridge. But like, you know, I essentially cherry picked you guys because I was like, you guys were always showing up prepared, excited with new ideas. Like you were just so engaged. I also found out Dave, you know, it was the older brother of like a kid I graduated high school with and hung out with all the time. And I was like, I can't believe that we've made this connection now. Because I grew up like looking at your fucking Warhammer models, you know, in your bedroom when you were like away in the Air Force. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it was like, you know, it was crazy that we ended up at the same D&D table together and now best friends writing a fucking podcast together, right? But like one of the things that we said at the start was like I felt like I was a forever DM, because like I was the only one wanting to do it. Well, Dave's like, well, I got experience doing this thing. I think you actually ran a session, I think once potentially at our campaign. I don't remember.
I can't remember.
I don't remember. It's all fuzzy to me now. Yeah. But like I kind of pitched this idea to him. I was like, well, what if we like alternate where essentially we'll just like, you do a story arc and then wherever that leaves off, the next person just kind of picks it up from there. Like we'll do our best to just like not spoil things for each other, but just like, find a way to hand things off so that it makes sense or give you time to like, come up with what's next. But we can just like kind of tandem DM a campaign. And because I wanted to play. I wanted to be able to just have moments where I could just be a player and just be one character and not have to worry about anything besides what's on my character sheet and the other players that I'm interacting with, right? Because like then it's more fun. It's a different kind of fun because then I just get to be part of the cast.
Mm-hmm. Now, at what point did you and Dave decide we're taking this to the end and we need to pick plot points? Like, so did you ever throw things back and forth? Like,
we already wrote what the overarching story was going to be right at the start before we even recorded the first episode. We spent some time just together emailing each other, like sharing docs on Google Drive or in Discord about just like, like I remember writing, like he wrote out a bunch of stuff about like the runners, when the Crucible runners were, like all that stuff. That's like the lore we started with.
There's going to be a frogman.
Yeah.
No.
You're like 8-paragraph treatment came first about the various factions, and then I riffed on that, and then there was
can you post
emails,
that somewhere?
Google Drives.
Oh, sure. It's I could probably dig that up. It's very out of date now. You can kind of see the huge change.
I would love to see it myself. I don't think I've ever seen it.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
I know I've got the Teldurian.
Being there from the start would be really cool to see like how you guys kind of started this off and like where it came from, like what was the brainchild in all this.
I had that on Trello, I think. It was like an old
Oh God, yeah.
Oh wow.
I totally forgot about that damn thing, that Trello board we had.
That was where we used to store all of our shit, and they just kind of fell off. But like, all I remember writing was like the story of Uhl, right? About Filbert, and Dave was actually the one who suggested that the kid be named Filbert. He's like, the kid has to have a name that is like that, like you can't help but make fun of, right? To kind of highlight the fact that this kid's like picked on. He's like, he's not treated like like the same.
How do you feel about that,
Phil? All right. For the
is it PH Filbert?
IL. No. Filbert.
Filbert from Rocco's Modern Life.
Almost assuredly, that's where I pulled the
like
name
Dilbert
from.
with an F.
Yeah, but I remember
turn the page, wash your hands.
Yeah. A lot of this was.
I didn't know I did such a good Filbert.
Oh yeah.
And I never delete text, so it's like, if I were to go to my text with Fran and scroll way the fuck back to 2016, it's there somewhere.
I'm nauseous.
I actually remember when I had the idea for the plot twist, I was sitting in the parking lot of a fucking Wendy's on Niagara Falls Boulevard, like in between two job sites, eating lunch, and we were texting, and that's where it came up. It was.
What did you have? What's your regular Wendy's order, Dave?
It used to be Baconator, and now usually, because my appetite is way less than it used to be like 5-6 years ago, like
just
one or two, couple of junior bacons.
A ketchup packet.
There's the Word doc. Oh my God, I found the Word doc. Okay, I'm gonna put it up in our Discord.
Yeah, post that.
That's so cool.
So you can kind of see how much it's changed, though, right? Because again, this is I wrote the last modified date on this is July 11th, 2016.
Do we want to put that behind the paywall? Are we gonna make that a Patreon?
Oh no, let me read through it again and just see if maybe I'll share it on Patreon or something like that. Let me think about what to do with this. I'll tell people once I make a decision, because again, like I'm just like trying to think about like where it needs to live, and if I actually want to share this with everybody, like the world. I mean, you guys can
with
see it now.
With our haplings.
Yeah, but like this was.
What do we call our fans again?
I don't think we had the name.
This isn't even. Yeah, this is definitely the edited version, because I think the original started maybe was only a few of those paragraphs before we got into Factions of the Realm, and that was on the original doc.
Yeah, and all the factions are in here. We didn't even explore some of these factions because we just never traveled to those places. But I wanted to make sure because we had that map, right? I started with the map. I asked Maxime Plus for permission to use the Telduria map that he had posted on the DMs Guild, right? He gave me all the instructions we need to do to make sure he's credited, that we, provide links to those things, like, like on our homepage and stuff like that. So, but so like I wanted to essentially, okay, I had the map, I had locations, I had things that were already on there. So now just take those things and make them something. Right. And that's all I did. I just took each location or each major place and then built a faction around who lives there, who are the inhabitants of this area, what do they do, what are they about? So that if we ever were to encounter them, we already have a basis for what they're like, right? And what that interaction is going to be like and why you might be there, right? What kind of adventures are we going to have there? So, we obviously explored some of them like the Archclerisy of Valen, the Omega Project,
Shalandria,
the Black Crown, which is the Crow Kings people, we didn't really necessarily see the Grey Guard, but that was the people of the Grey Citadel, the Sea Lords.
We haven't even touched on the Halloween specials.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Once you got to the point where you're like, Halloween's coming up and we want to do something different.
Yeah, we just kind of picked Halloween as sort of a thing that we wanted to do special. Yeah, you know what? Thanks for reminding me, Phil, because that's the thing. My mind is just a void sometimes.
John got a 7-episode run.
It was not intended to be that way. It was not intended to be that way. Oh no! What are you trying to say, Phil?
all I'm saying is it was a beautiful turn where you could tell we were experimenting. And don't get me wrong, I came to the show as a fan. If listeners don't know, Fran and Dave basically ushered me into the fold, and I ran with it because I couldn't game as regularly as I really wanted to. The cast was kind of full at the time, and I think it might have been when Joe left that you started really drawing people in, and finally I got to be on the show. It had already been playing for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like one of the lucky ones. You know what I mean? I was
Phil. I mean, but even before you had your first episode as Hedrick, you were already doing stuff for the show, right? As a quote unquote fan, a friend, but also a fan, right? Mm-hmm. You made all of our character art. I remember you designed all those amazing initiative trackers, right? We were just talking about before we turned the mics on, right?
The portrait of Pragnar and the sausage.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just
or already the sunbeam.
You were already in the orbit of this show, right? It only made sense to involve you because it was just it just didn't feel like a question. You know what I mean?
It just felt like an evocative experience. I knew these circles. I knew these were all boys. Surely I could trust in these guys because they had experience. And I was like, fair enough. The weirdest thing I gotta say, the little gag that I came on was I was filling in because Mike was unavailable.
Yep.
And Mike played a bard. And I had played enough D&D that I was I want to challenge myself and play this bard. Very charismatic, not really what I typically think of a hero.
The amazing songs that came out.
But I was if I'm going to be a bard, I have to be a very different bard.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I think that we had our sort of ultimate sort of realization of that during the Battle of the Bards episode.
Battle of the Bards, yeah.
That was, I mean, the dynamic between you two established in that episode and then thereforth was probably one of my favorite things that we got to just kind of call upon. If I ever needed to just farm a little content, right, I'd find some way, and I know Dave would do the same thing of just trying to pit you guys against each other a little bit. Right, to create scenarios where you would be at odds, right? Or you would be trying to one up each other because you were both starving for the spotlight, right?
And I think what's fun about that too,
Hedrick craved it so much, right? But he was more humble in his approach, whereas Quinn was just balls to the wall, you will know my name and you will know it was me,
Also, can we just talk about how one of the main turning points of the status of the party in the story was when you I think it was the plot point that Quinn was like writing messages and sending
and rolled the D100 as a 100.
And I rolled a D100 and I rolled
okay, we'll see
100.
how this goes. Roll a D100 and I literally rolled a 100.
No, I rolled it. I rolled the D100 to see like, okay, let's just kind of see the magnitude, right? I was going to just kind of use that as sort of a brief, like some sort of reference for myself to see like how effective your advertising campaign was, right? And like I rolled a perfect 100, so I was like, well, shit. Like I must do as the dice have decided, and so I did. You know,
and I think what's fun about the Hedrick Quinn thing too is you've got this campaign, you've got this party, and you got 2 bards, and like I've never it's very rare to have people playing a bard in a campaign to begin with, and here you have 2 of them who are doing things so dynamically different. And it's just so cool to have been a part of that too.
I want to add something too, because like, you know, I think that, okay, so there's always been sort of the chaotic element, right, that existed. And for a long time, that was James, right? The Hoblet timer is to us infamous, right? Like that we established the concept of essentially a Hoblet timer where like
Massimo changed that all.
Well, hold on, right? I'm gonna get to this. Hold on. Because then we had Nicole, and then Nicole was sort of the ultimate agent of chaos as well, right? And especially when James was able to be, you know, back on the show for a little while, and the 2 of them had their back and forth. That was like almost like. But let me get to that. So we started with like again the Hoblet timer, right? And I think the heist really exemplified that. I think that's really where the Hoblet timer was born, where he was just like, you left me alone. You left me alone for 10 minutes. What was I supposed to do? It's like literally what we told you to do, which was nothing. And, you know, it's just like, so like, you know, from then on, right, it was sort of like, we have to stop arguing and make a fucking decision, or else James, aka Hoblet, is just going to go do it. He's just going to go do it. Whatever it is, whatever he's got in mind is just going to happen, right?
And then no timer though.
My theory is that this exists in all parties and has always existed, is that if you wait enough time, the most impulsive member of your party will take the wheel. And that's been James. That's been Nicole, that's been Massimo, that's been Zach. The 4 of you have basically caused me to stop writing too much shit in advance because you're all
agreed.
Plus, I have 2 bards who, by their nature, are completely fucking ungovernable.
And the thing is, like, you know, with the way that John played Jarrell, like, yes, he was sort of that, like, the grounding presence, but he was also, because of his own ego, also like a bit of an agent of chaos himself, even though he was still acting within the bounds of his oath. Like he, like, you know, Jarrell was just sort of like that. He wasn't lawful stupid, right? Like you know, that trope of like being so lawful good that you're just like too dumb to actually understand what it actually means to be like good or like actually for the people or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Like I don't really want to go into that trope too much, but like, you know, but at the same time,
there is a shining light of good. Maybe sometimes a little bit of a dim light, but a shining light nonetheless.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Exactly. Yeah.
What I like to think was the straight man, except that his straight man is wackier than the weird one in most other duos.
Yeah.
And the fact that it is almost like a timer, but in Jarrell's case, it's a meter. And at given times,
a tolerance meter, right?
The tolerance goes down. But if he exceeds that tolerance, then he will act. And I like to call it the nope meter. Because Jarrell would like handle so much, you know, shit from the rest of the party.
Yeah, well, there'd be times where I myself or James or Dave would have to be like, "Hey, Jarrell, are you okay with this?
Right?
What's being suggested right now? Right?"
And the influence characters had on each other was a huge part of why I loved it so much. Like when Pregnart or Dedu were around, what happened? And when Jarrell was there, could they get away with certain things?
Right.
And those were all just fantastic. And then, of course, Jarrell's morality compass did shift. I think part of that's Felix's fault.
Sorry.
It wasn't like a shift like in the good evil axis. It was just sort of that 90 degree, that opposite direction shift
compromise,
pragmatism.
Yeah. Actually, so I'm curious about something. So Nicole, right, as someone who joined our show like years into it, right? You know, I you can speak to this a little bit better, but just to kind of like, I guess, give a little background, like when we talked about Boris the Butcher, you had essentially like when I told you about this character, you essentially listened to the first few episodes of our show, and then the episodes where Boris appeared to kind of just get an idea of what she was like. But like, what was it like for you? I guess like walking into the established universe of the Hapless Heroes and like trying to embrace that and like make your mark on it. I'm just curious because again, like you're probably one of like one of the newest cast members, so to speak. Yeah. But at the same time, you've been with us for a while.
One of the top 8 newest cast members.
I mean, you gave me a good summary to come in with. I still definitely felt completely lost in the first episode that I was in. It was just like absorb and make as many notes as possible because I have no idea what's happening. But like the campaign that I had played in before this, I mentioned, had gone a couple years. We got up to like, we definitely did not hit level 20, but we were in the teen levels. So like I had experience with like the large world building and the very, very detailed DM that's just got a crazy universe. Shout out to Sam.
You're giving us a lot of credit. I was gonna say you're giving us a lot of credit there. As I say, it's probably to your DM because like we have this large universe, but so much of it was improvised.
Where Sam, my DM from my long campaign before this, had spent a lot of time making an incredibly detailed universe with like notes that didn't even get touched in the end, which you're familiar with because you've got players like me that are just like rails, what rails. But so like coming into it was all right, I guess, in that sense, because I kind of had a footing for that type of game, but coming in the middle was definitely like a lot of observation at first. When I look at some of my early notes, right, like I have a note telling me to listen to episodes 14 and 15. And then like my notes from the first episode I was in just say things like 161 years ago something went wrong in Uhl. And then loyal to Queen, and then something fishy is happening, and then let's see here. Kip is not here. I tag along with Jarrell and Hyde. Sea powers came from some potion. Like just me being like, I have so many things I need to like learn and ask questions about here.
I think that's what was cool about like how we kind of were in and out too. Like I know Zach and I were the longest running non-DM cast members, but we also had these moments where we were kind of absent for chunks of time. And what was cool about that is it developed the story even more, right? Because Quinn would come back or Peridot would come back and not know what was going on. And so characters had to either catch them up or like we had to like jump into the story. And I think that's what created such a cool dynamic with a lot of the story arcs.
Yeah, I mean, we did our best to sort of just like work with what we had, right? Like if someone couldn't be here, all right, like that's fine. Like we will figure out a way to continue on anyways, because like we just didn't want to ever really stop.
I think what was kind of like a very interesting flavor was like Fran had said, everybody was invested. But these are kind of like awkward situations where people are running into one another and like trying to fill each other in. And like as characters, you start to just kind of accept things as they are rolling and be like, there's a frogman on deck now. There's a goose up in the crow's nest. Like this is
you were married to a cloud giant.
Yeah, this is how we roll. Yeah. Like when you get that kind of freedom, you really just want to kind of push it and say like, I'll dive in, I think everybody brought it. And that's why it made it to level 20 fighting Vecna and Larlock. Like it came down to it.
So the idea, the whole like I guess like the evil triangle, or not the evil triangle, but just we'll call it the triangle of
Illuminati.
Like, the heroes,
the triumvirate,
right? You had the heroes at one corner, and then in the other two, you have like essentially Future Filbert, right? AKA known as Ebenezer, quote unquote, right? And then you had Vecna. So you had Future Filbert and Vecna were opposing forces, and you and the two of them were also opposing forces, right? So like I like once we started to kind of like really get into the meat and potatoes of, okay, we need to like start making this separation more clear, right? And start, kind of hinting at the fact that it's more than just like this one thing, right? Because like, I didn't really think we were going to get so far into the realm of the gods like we did, right? We kind of almost turned this into like a planar campaign at the end. But it's kind of cool that we did. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like, it was just not what we had intended when we first set out to this. It was just that, okay, like obviously with powers this great, the gods have to be involved in some way, right? Like, and so for me, it was more like, okay, Vecna is an opportunist. So like whatever this shit that future Filbert did, Vecna saw that and was like, opportunity for me to do something terrible. And I like things that are terrible. And so like, that was his sort of like way in, right? As sort of a way to exploit these magical forces or whatever to now become a bigger player than he was before. Right. And then, so that we saw all that stuff was just happening in the backdrop, right? Like really unbeknownst to anyone, right? Until it started to be introduced and the effects started to be more prevalent. Because like when we started to see the difference between what future Filbert's undead looked like, right? And what Vecna's armies looked like, suddenly now we have this separation. It was like, wait, well, what's going on here? That was very hard to manage. It was to make sure that we hit everything. Yeah, big swing.
A swing in like levity. Everything that you do is going to matter from here on out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that was hard because like I think Zach brought this up maybe a year or two ago, where it was like our format is okay. The format that we've sort of started to lean into and feel very comfortable in is sort of this one of like very heavy improv, right? Where we're like, okay, we have like some things prepared, we have some ideas of how the adventures are going to go, but we like myself and Dave have allowed you guys to sort of take the driver's seat for a little bit, to sort of like help create these stories, and we just kind of like build them around you, right? That's sort of the method we adapted as the show went on, but it became a little more difficult to maintain a story structure, with the sort of the lack of guardrails, right? Because we were treating this campaign more like a sandbox, which is fine, that's great, but we were still trying to like slap a story onto it, right? And I think
why it took 3.5 years to wrap up the final couple weeks of the campaign.
I think that's really the best explanation for it. I think that's really the best explanation for it, right? Is that like, that was the main challenge, was just like, how do we actually conclude this fucking story when like you guys will take any little thing and make it an adventure. The hamster.
The herring pie.
The herring pie.
Oh my God. Didn't we spend like half a session deciding whether we were going to go
2 sessions on the herring pie?
But like that was these tasty little morsels in front of us.
But here's the thing, right? Like that episode, or like that little mini, like that literal red herring was supposed to be a lesson in like, listen, y'all, like this is not what you're here for. So like, try to focus. Some things are just things, and they're just like little story pieces that are just gonna sprinkle them in, but that's all they are. They are not a thread for you to grab and pull as hard as you can on.
I'm here for the
it's like asking a mouse to not grab the cheese. I mean,
right.
Like I said, completely ungovernable.
So this is why, yes. So Zach, I think you said it perfectly. That's why it took 3 fucking years to end this campaign once we actually intended to end it. Because
thank God, then we got Boris.
Yeah, we got Boris.
Yay.
We got the whole like time. To be fair, actually, so I want to talk for a second about the time loop arc, right, that we did towards the end there. Because I feel like I don't think we had a recap since then, and I want to just address that really quick.
We haven't had a recap since I've been on the show, so.
Okay. So like I had this idea. I remember watching. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the show or the book series, The Magicians. But it's essentially,
I am.
Okay,
you just made that up.
Love The Magicians.
I'm obsessed with that show. I want to read the book.
So there was an episode, and spoiler alert, skip ahead like 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this very quick explanation. But there was an episode where they essentially like were reliving the same day over and over again, right? Like just the same time loop, because like there was something to be gleaned or something to learn from it, right? And like, but at the end, like if they failed, right, the world ended, and then suddenly we're back to the start. And I was like, how do I turn this into an adventure, right? That concept of like, it's like almost like a Groundhog's Day type thing,
or like the Umbrella Academy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've never watched the Umbrella Academy, but like,
it's another good one.
But so like,
there's
just
also
the idea
an episode
of
Buffy.
The idea of essentially like, okay, taking an adventure and having it take place over the course of a fixed period. Hell, Majora's Mask, big, Legend of Zelda, the N64 game, right? Yeah. Big influence there. Like you have this many days until everything is destroyed, and you have to figure out how to make that not happen.
I think that game is part of the reason I have anxiety as an adult. Okay,
but sorry,
I've read between two episodes.
But like, so like I wanted to take that, but like, take that concept. It's like, now how do I make that an actual playable adventure, right? So all I wanted to do is essentially introduce the concept of a time loop, which was like essentially like, just okay, you have your method of resetting, right? Which was eating the fish, which was also unprompted. That I didn't actually know what the method for resetting was going to be. I just knew it was going to involve like the liquid time that you guys stole.
Which
I'm so happy I made the spur of the moment decision to be like, yeah, I poured it all in the goldfish bowl. Yeah, you guys just didn't see me do it.
Right. So like I wanted to use that as sort of the vehicle for how this weird time loop, because like, hand wavium when we talk about how magic does these things, right? It doesn't matter. As long as it serves the story, like just fucking do it. Mm-hmm. But like I wanted to use that, essentially eating the fish, as your way to reset if you think, oh nope, this one's fucked. We gotta start over. Right. But essentially how we were going to handle if you did reset, are we going to have to play through from day one, or are we going to yada some things if you want to do them the same way, right? Like, how do we want to how can I structure this so that there's sort of like something that like a mechanic or something that you guys can use as sort of your vessel to do this? But you didn't really even need much of that aside from the reset mechanic. I just kind of like let some of that stuff play out and just like sprinkle in the story, because like, again, I had written the stuff about Uhl and the stuff about Filbert and all that shit like 6 years ago. So like, you know what I mean? Or more. So it was just like, okay, I get to now expose this stuff through whatever you guys do.
I think what was fun about that too.
And then the hamster happened.
The hamster. I think what's fun about that too is when you watch those episodes, it's usually just one character. One character is replaying and learning and figuring it out and trying to like reset the things in motion.
Right. With but now we had a group of people affecting the outcomes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Which is why I think the yada yadas didn't happen, because
everyone wanted to do something different.
We were all trying to do different things. And so it was always creating a new scenario everywhere we went. I think it was great. I think it was super fun.
But yeah, so like, I thought that was such a great, I don't know. I'm very proud of how that played out. Again, didn't even play out the exact way I initially dreamed it would, but at the same time, like it played out exactly the way it needed to. It was super cool. And I really enjoyed that.
I did too. And that's hard. That's hard for any storyteller, like time loops and playing with time.
I just wanted to do something different.
Yeah,
I wanted to do something that was
cool.
I wanted to do something that was less linear, right? Where it was like, there wasn't necessarily a set defined like start and finish. Aside from either like the start is before the apocalypse and the end is either the apocalypse happens or it doesn't. And I actually had a plan in place for if you were to have allowed the apocalypse to happen. So like if you were to have died, and I guess I want to reveal that now, because like it never had to actually happen. But so the foul upheaval would have happened, right? So like, this crazy magical explosion, like everyone sort of like just like killed instantly by the magic and then risen as undead. And I would have had it so that the entire party was essentially undead, right? And then suddenly like, like one of your like rotting like zombie remains was going to like, be like, you're just sort of shambling around and happen upon this little goldfish.
Shambling.
Right. Like shambling around, and then what would happen upon this goldfish in a bowl of, in a bowl of water, and be like, oh, that's tasty, and eat it, and then it would reset, and we bring it back to the beginning again. You know what I mean? Just as like so you witness the apocalypse, you see it happen, and then just happenstance, your character goes and eats the fish, and we start over again and be like, okay, well, we fucked up. That was bad. That was
that would be
bad.
Pregnart, right? Pregnart would immediately eat a fish.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna decide in the moment like which of your zombified remains would have eaten the fish. But yes, like that was my intention. If you had allowed the apocalypse to happen, if you had allowed the foul upheaval to actually occur,
I would ever discuss exactly how many resets we would have. And
No,
how you kept saying that they would be limited, and I was wondering like.
So you wouldn't have discussed it with me because he was in charge and I was a player.
You told me it was based off of the number of clocks that I had in my. It was based off of how many magic clocks I had, which I believe the answer was 6.
So yes,
yeah, I had 6 clocks.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Did I have something prepared
so
if you managed to use them all?
2 members.
I mean, I wasn't told this until after we had already gotten out of Uhl.
Right.
Well, what I like to think is like you roll the d6 and you got the 6. Like that was just one little fortune that gave us more chances rather than seeing Pregnart's ashy tongue extend out to retrieve a goldfish.
There's 2 reasons
for us.
There's 2 reasons I wanted to keep this ambiguous. 1, to make sure I can enable that moment regardless of how many were left. B, I said 2 and now I'm using letters. Whatever, I don't care. The second reason was like I wanted to keep an air of tension and uncertainty so that like there was more, because of the fact that again you guys are a chaotic bunch and just do a bunch of wacky ass shit. I wanted there to feel like there were stakes, and that with the stakes not being necessarily even enumerated, I felt that would increase the tension because like you weren't certain how many shots you actually have. So it would force you or maybe encourage you to make them count. And what's the first fucking thing you guys did? Was eat the fish immediately. Eat the fish immediately.
We did not do that. It only took one person to swallow the fish.
Was that me or Boris?
It was you.
Boris.
The first 2 times.
No, it was Boris. It was Boris the first time.
I swallowed it because I got told we were going to get a giant peanut butter cup if I swallowed the goldfish. And I was like, done, and ate the fish.
Yeah.
That's how Pregnart read the situation.
Our first 2 results were as a result of unexpected decisive action. You and then me. Just like, I don't like this. Is go and drink the fish.
Right. And so like, I wanted to give you guys the freedom to sort of approach these resets as you willed. I was just going to describe situations as you approach them. There were only a few constants, right? The constants were the Filbert's accident, right? And his subsequent sort of like downfall, his connection with the Modron, and like, the opening of planes. Essentially, it was something to enable him. Like, why, like, what was his pursuit of this greater power supposed to be for, right? And the way I had initially envisioned that was that, like, because of the fact that he's always been looked down on or not treated as sort of an equal in like the world of magic, especially with who his father is, this like well-renowned, well-known magician, like always sort of being in that shadow, he wanted to do something so great that like no one could forget who he was. It's just that because of his lack of expertise, he essentially does something a little too much. And again, Vecna seizes that opportunity, corrupts Filbert, and then the foul upheaval happens.
Right.
That's it. That was the sequence of events that were always going to play out until you did something to disrupt them. Those were going to be the constants in every single thing. And then we introduced the hamster. And then I had to add the hamster as a constant to every single reset. That hamster, if it exists now, because we've now put it in here, it now has always existed. It will always exist. Like it was always existed.
Exercised it, so it was all good.
But you know what I mean? But I had to make sure that like, okay, if we're going to introduce this concept and like I'm going to bring it in, now I have to make sure that if we reset again, the hamster is still in play. And how do I affect things? So, I was going to find some way for things to get fucked up if it actually got thrown into the ley line. It would just cause a different kind of apocalypse.
Right.
Where maybe the world was invaded by like demon hamsters. I don't know. We never got there. So we never really could have had a chance to explore that.
I mean, you're lucky it's not just some group of murder hobos. Like we find ourselves.
Yeah, but I knew that about you. But I knew that about you guys, like when we started this, right? Because, like, something that I encourage everybody to do if you're going to start your own campaign at home is like before you even sit down to play your first session, talk about the type of game an experience that everyone wants to have. Because it's very important that people are kind of on that same level, on that same page, because different people want different kinds of games, and there is no one like right way to play this game. So but at the same time, like if one person's looking for a certain kind of experience, another one's looking for someone that's very different, and you as a DM cannot find a way to make both of those things possible and make both people happy, a decision needs to be made, and maybe one of those players needs to find a different table to play at based on what you're able to, what experience you are able and comfortable providing. And I'm very blessed. I think to have such, you guys are just, I don't know, you guys are just great. I really I can't really say much about it. Like Zach, obviously, you've brought such a all of you have brought like a different element of something that we all need. Like Zach, you've really brought like a sense of like improv and enabling that level of just reacting to things because you have such a passion
Fran,
for that.
That there have been a couple times that you have said that my ideas are not possible. That now are very
Already
much
done.
a steady concrete part of the podcast.
That's like one of our greatest tropes is Fran saying something will never work and then us doing it.
Jarrell getting the Grail was one of those moments.
Behind the scenes, I just also is just maybe a tiny tease for the next campaign. In the first couple weeks of my joining the podcast and talking to Fran about what is possible and where it could go, I mentioned an idea that Fran said, no, it's never going to happen. That is kind of the primary basis of the next entire campaign.
Fantastic.
I just want to say that.
Okay, sure. But I was gonna say, but at the start, like I had to open myself a little bit because like I was a preparer too, right? And like Phil knows this because I think you are a serial over preparer.
Oh, yeah. Right. You have to let go.
I had to let go of so many things that I was like holding on for dear life to, right? It was like, cause like I needed structure. I needed I just didn't feel comfortable like living off the rails, right? And just like being able to come up with things quickly. I didn't trust myself to do that. But I think that obviously as we had been doing this for so long, I started to just trust myself more that it's like, whatever, I could just react to what y'all are doing. I could do a little bit of yes ands, or at the very least a no but, right? To just like enable you guys to just express yourselves and like, have your impact as your characters and like really be able to do that to the fullest degree. And we can just sort of like shape everything else around those dynamics. I think that's probably the biggest thing, right, about doing this show is that we have to like that's what we need to do in order to make this entertaining, not only for ourselves but for our audience, because it just helps. It just keeps things moving, right? We're always just kind of reacting and moving along, and I appreciate like being exposed to that new perspective, because like, I think that my view on like how to run these games was much more rigid at the start than it is today. I've sort
also,
of like
also just in the last couple months, I feel like I've had a good time seeing us explore sort of the differences between the different kinds of scarinesses that are associated with improvising the direction of the podcast versus what we've been doing, which is closing up a very directed plot to a very directed point, which
exactly
has, you might think that like, oh, we've written this into the thing, or you guys have written into this thing, and not to expose you too much, Fran, but there was a point in the last couple months where you were kind of like getting down on yourself, kind of getting nervous about like the podcast in general. And it was an interesting thing just having the realization of, just because we have a decided landing point doesn't make that easier to attain. It has its own brand of scariness.
Mm-hmm.
To when you, like the scariness of trying to like improvise something on the spot.
So I don't want to go too long on this, but just because I want to talk about, because you brought up a good point, I want to tie that to like what the future of this show is now, right? I want to get into that before we close out. But just on a personal note, right? Like I'm someone who like when I embark on a creative endeavor, right? Whether it's music, whether it's this podcast, right? Like I am someone who commits like overcommits, like 100%. Like if this is something I'm passionate about, I am in it. Like I eat, sleep, and breathe this shit, right? And my inner critic is very loud in these moments sometimes because I take these things so seriously, because they're my passions. I feel like I'm always kind of like I'm setting sometimes I set expectations that I just like like are unreachable, right? Or are things that are just like more idealistic than like realistic, right? Because like I just want everything to be the best that I can make it always, right? But I'm human. I'm only capable of so many things. I only have so much time to devote to certain things, right? Like if I wish I could do this all day forever, but I can't, right? I need something to pay the bills because like, we're not doing that with this. This is a passion project.
Wait,
right?
This isn't paying our bills?
It's paying our hosting costs. Thanks Patreon, right?
Hey.
Oh shit.
Right?
I racked up a big credit card bill. I hope.
Shit. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about
I was really relying on this.
But so, like, you know,
I've developed a huge penchant for Balenciaga during this podcast.
But hold on. Let me just finish this thought because, like, I ramble sometimes if I don't. Anyways, but so, like, you know, it's hard sometimes to like just take a step back and appreciate like what you have created. Because like, so like I try to be intentional about like trying to do that, especially if I'm feeling down on myself, because it's like, it's not worth that. Because it's like, okay, at the end of the day, we're still creating something and it's like, I'm having a great fucking time, right? I'm having so much fun just doing this with you guys and gals and goobers, you know, like it's, again, I'll leave it up to you who the goober is, but I think we all know. So like, it's just, it just makes me, it brings me so much joy. It gives me a lot of joy to share this with people, to hear how much people have enjoyed this, like that, how we brought them to tears last week. Like, you know, like I was getting a little emotional too, because it's just like, you know, we've done so much together and like, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I have to remind myself of this stuff, right? When I do feel down on myself, like, oh, I didn't do that the way I really wanted to do it, or oh, I didn't get to this thing. Or it's like, well, just let it go, because you know what? Like we still made something fucking awesome. So I have no regrets. You know, I don't have any regrets.
And that's absolutely a lesson I learned through this too. And it's something, you know, one of my kids is an aspiring artist, and it's the lesson I learned in this is the lesson I try to, you know, tell them. There's no such thing as perfect. Cut, publish, move.
Yep. Stop focusing on making everything absolutely perfect and just do things to the best of your ability in the moments that you're able to do them in. You know, put your heart and soul into it and good things will come. That's all I have to say. Now, as far as the future of this podcast, again, we have some things in store. I don't want to spoil a lot, but we already have, you know, some of the foundations starting to be built for what our next campaign is going to be. We're still going to be using like, you know, the Dungeons and Dragons like system as far as we know right now. You know, it's just like, you know, like that's something that's familiar. Like we want to make sure that this is accessible and whatnot. But again, I think we're going to be leaning more into what we were talking about before, was this like this improv sense. Like we have an idea of what our first adventure is going to be and how we're going to, you know, bring us all into what the grander scheme of things is going to be. But like, I personally want to see us doing, you know, more like just actual hapless adventures, right, for a little while before we were to introduce any sort of big bad. It doesn't have to be some sort of like capital B big bad. It could just be whatever it is. I want to embrace the things that we've found that we're good at and just really lean hard into those things. So as far as details, like, you know, we're going to do the kind of same thing. We're going to do like a session 0 to like kind of explain what some of the new mechanics are. I want to split that into a few different things so that we can just talk about how we're going to run things. And then, you know, for anyone who doesn't want spoilers for what the first episodes are going to be, you know, we'll talk, we'll leave like a little section for it to cut off and you can stop listening. But for the others, we'll explain a little bit more in detail about like, hey, these are the things, the new, like some of the custom things that we're introducing here, you know, because I know there's some of you like love that rules shit. So I want to make sure that we have some explanation, because we're going to be introducing maybe a few custom mechanics, some reflavoring of things that are established. You know, we're going to be actually even working on in some of our off time here, like an actual, like an internal source book for ourselves, just to reference and keep track of a lot of the things that we're going to be establishing in this new campaign, just so that we could kind of introduce some fun mechanics and some fun challenges and just like have a central place where all that stuff is located. So like, that's just some of the stuff we're going to be doing behind the scenes. I'm sure some of us we're going to be meeting from time to, often to like go over this stuff, and there might be some content that comes out of those sessions. Like, I just don't want to put anything concrete out there, but just expect that we're going to be active on our Discord. We're going to be active on our socials. Like, if you want to get a hold of us, like, we're just like a few clicks away on the internet. I'm really, really excited to now that we've finally sort of closed the book on this campaign, like to really start getting into like heavily getting into writing sessions. Like I want, to meet regularly and just talk through like lore and establish things. Like, I want everyone in this show who is going to be a part of it, whether you're going to be like a main cast member, or if you just want to be, just part of some of these writing sessions, like I want to encourage everyone here to be a part of like our world building for this next season, because like I think having everyone's creative input in how this world and how this universe is going to be shaped, right, in the same way that everyone smacked the anvil, right, that's sort of like my symbolism for like all of us are going to have a hand in how this next campaign looks and feels. So I really can't wait for you all to see it, because I think it's going to be fucking awesome.
I'm excited.
So with that, I'm just going to turn it to the rest of the group. Like, are there any parting words anyone has, before we enter our whatever hiatus this is going to be, our brief hiatus?
So I kind of want to riff on an idea you kind of introduced earlier, that, before you have the game, you talk with your players about what kind of game you want. And there are actually two answers to that come. The first one is the one that your players fucking tell you when you sit down. But the real important one is the answer that reveals itself through the play sessions of what the game actually becomes. And like, we became a comedy improv podcast that happened to be built on the bones of D&D. We didn't know that going in. It's the answer that revealed itself as we did it.
But now we wholeheartedly embrace it.
Yeah. And that's just, we know now. We know who we are. So season 2 is going to be this very different thing, because
we have an identity now. Like, we know who we are.
We know who we are. We're dudes playing dudes disguised as other dudes.
Not all dudes.
That we evolved.
Not all dudes.
So
everyone's a dude.
I'm glad that
dude is gender neutral.
I'm glad that the podcast evolved into the comedy podcast.
Yes.
Comedy improv that was built on the D&D bones, because it started off as It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia reference podcast built on Dungeons and Dragons bones.
Yeah. Well, you do what you know until you know what you're doing.
The number of times.
Well, and I can't even imagine that show is not somewhat improv at points anyway.
Yeah. Have you even done the between two episodes yet?
No.
The Sunnycast D&D party is got to be.
Okay, that's the next one. That's the next one. Mark it down. I love it.
I'll keep it in the vault.
That's a keeper. Yeah, there's a reason why. It's relatable. You can see it. I think the relationships that has happened throughout this, 10-year of a campaign has been kind of life-changing, coming into the game as somebody, a lot of these players, like, none of us are professionals, but like, even the experience we have, to be able to translate it to something that is really fun to listen to.
Yeah, like, listenable? Question mark?
Everybody made sure that they were having fun.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing, right? I think there was a turning point when we all really sort of, and I don't think it was ever really necessarily spoken out loud, but we all sort of took the personal responsibility of making sure that we were all having a good time, right? That we were essentially enabling and embracing sort of the good time for everyone, and finding a way to make that all work together. And that's not easy for everyone to do. And I think that deserves some credit.
I've been taking like proper improv classes over the past year or so, and one of the things that some teachers like to say is that if you're not having a good time, you're the asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of like creative juice in that. Like, if you are in a scene, if you're in your show, if you're in your campaign, and you're like thinking down on it, then like, what are you doing? What are you not doing? That's like creating that.
Yeah. What's missing?
I feel like
right?
there's like a lot of life in that, and there's a lot of truth in that.
Sometimes, individual ones of us, and definitely me in more recent months, haven't had that good coming out of us. But we've, I've personally felt incredibly fortunate that you guys were there to bring it out of me when I didn't have it in me personally.
I was going to say something very similar, Dave. I feel like there were moments where I was like, I don't know if I should be in the episode because of where I was in my feelings and in what was going on in my life.
We've all had those moments.
Yeah, we all did, right? And you show up on this screen and you see all these beautiful faces, and it's like, nope, I'm here and I'm diving in. Like this is my 3.5 hours of fantasy.
Well, like because before we used to meet in person too, like the first thing we do sometimes before we even turn the mics on was just like, hey, like how the fuck are you, right? Like this was sort of like our support group session, right? Like, hey, we are here for each other first and foremost, right? Because real life comes first. We all understand this. So if you're going through some shit and you just need to air it out, we're here, right? Like we're all friends. We all get it. And it's sort of like, this has sort of become like almost therapy for us in a way, because like, it also gives us a moment to just be ourselves, enjoy ourselves, and just lean into something that's not so stressful and so serious, right? It's just like it's something so fun and like, and I don't know. I love it.
Well, I don't want to conflate therapy with community.
Sure. You're right. You're right. Because therapy is also important. And hey, listen,
just not to talk down about what you're saying, but like, this is, for me personally, you guys have just been a really important family to me over the past years, and I love you all very much.
Yeah, I love you too, man. That goes all
talk about tears.
But it's just that's what this episode was gonna probably end up with, So it's important to acknowledge that because at the end of the day, that's what this is, right? It's a group of friends like talking in front of microphones and just like having a good time, I'm
so happy that now we've established who we are, how we work together, and like moving forward creatively with that.
I think that's going to make
a very, very exciting.
I think that's what's going to make season 2 of this show that much more like, I'm not going to say necessarily high quality, but that's not really what I'm necessarily aiming for. It's more just like the identity has been established. So like we're gonna just be coming out the gate like knowing exactly what we want to do and how we want to entertain you.
I think season 2 could probably last for 12 years.
On that note, I think
John. I think John had something to say.
John, did you have something?
I'm 50s playing D&D. I don't know. Maybe.
No. Any other parting words or anything like that? We still have another mailbag episode coming up. This isn't the last one we're going to be releasing before again we take our brief hiatus. But and
I think we could. I kind of want to do. I have like a couple ideas just to have like 2 to 3 episode like little guys just to
there's so much more to talk about,
stretch my legs in terms of like starting to DM like something that doesn't have anything to do with anything. I've got like some like prefab campaigns that I kind of want to try out just as training wheels to try out my DM shoes.
Yeah, we might as well slap the mics on for that. So stay tuned. Like like I said, we'll be announcing stuff and all the places where you can reach us, which I'll tell you about in just a second here. That so that you can stay updated. Because again, we're not going away. We're not going anywhere. We are just going to be burying our heads into making getting season 2 ready for you to experience and enjoy with us. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and start outroing the show. If you like us, I would love it if you found us on the internet. Like I said, you could find us on Twitter and Instagram. We also on we're on like Facebook and stuff like that, but we don't really use those socials too much anymore. I think Twitter is probably one of the ones where they're the most active on. But I mean, honestly, you could DM us on any of those places.
I've personally been a little disillusioned with Twitter and social media in general.
Yeah, same.
I really love. I can't like blow Discord's horn too loudly. I feel like that could have gone the wrong way, but Discord is awesome. Because I like how intentional Discord is. Again, it feels like an extension of the community that
exactly. It actually feels like a place where we've been, and it's really been able to build our community. So if you want to join our Discord,
the link to that. Where's the link to the Discord again? Sorry.
You can find that link in our show notes. I think it's in our bio on Twitter as well. It's also, I think, in our bio on Instagram. There's that invite link. You can just click it, and if you don't have an account, you create an account. I think you have to have an account for longer than a certain amount of time just to prevent bots and like spam from joining the server or whatever. But join our server. We have like all these different discussion channels. I'm actually going to be structuring things a little bit differently for season 2, where I'm actually going to be creating. They have this new ability to have threads, like a forum. So for our episode talk, I'll actually be creating a new thread for each new episode to talk about them in, so that we don't have to do a ton of like spoiler tagging and teaching people how to do that. We could just kind of have one place for that to live, where the only time you're going to be exposed to a spoiler is if you genuinely just click on that episode title and then read all the conversation that's happening about it. Just so that we can kind of keep that organized and keep spoilers where they need to be, so that anyone can just be part of the discussion and not have to risk knowing something that they haven't gotten to yet. Because people listen to podcasts in different ways,
My favorite part about Discord is that I've never seen an ad for a weird knockoff brand Spider-Man action figure from Wish.com.
That's true. And I mean, I can't speak highly enough about how important that is to us.
Leave Scooter Man alone!
But so yeah, join our Discord.
Man.
Join our Discord. Come talk to us. Also, like I said, we're doing a mailbag episode. So I've created a thread in our Discord server in the episode talk channel that it's called Mailbag Questions. Just go in there, throw your questions in there. We will answer them on the air when we record that episode. Or if you don't want to use Discord, you can DM us on Twitter. You can email us at haplessheroes@gmail.com. Send us your questions.
You can blow the dust off of our subreddit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I'll still get mod mail notifications for that. But like, so just like, however you want to reach us, if you have a question, I encourage you to ask it. If you prefer we not say your name or like say who it came from, that's fine. Just let us know. Like, we don't have to call you out, but we will answer your questions. Like, however you feel comfortable asking. That's what we want to do for you, because I'm sure a lot of you have questions and there's stuff that we did not cover in this sort of pseudo recap. So yeah, reach out to us, find us. It'd be awesome. Also, I'd love it. We'd all love it if you left us a 5-star review on the podcast service of your choice.
I love those.
Honestly,
I love those so much.
That's the biggest thing I think still that can help us, like, you know, be viewed more in the algorithm, or even just tell a friend about the show, right? Just like spread the love of Hapless Heroes. That's what we really want to, like, really are trying to say here. And if you say some nice words about us, whether it's in a review form or if it's in a review form on our 5-star channel on our Discord, we'll find it, we'll read it, we'll acknowledge you as the 5-star human that you are, and it's going to be super awesome. You should just do that. Also, if you really, really, really like us, I think I mentioned at some point during this show, and I've mentioned it many times at the end of many episodes, we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/haplessheroes. I'm working on, if stuff hasn't already been moved all the way to the $5 tier, I'm working on sliding literally all the bonus content we have currently to the $5 tier. Because at this point, like, $5 a month, like I said, price of a cup of coffee every month, all that money goes back into the show, and I want to make sure that it's all this bonus content we've made for you is accessible to whoever, you know, wants to listen to it, because it's just like, you know, we just love making stuff for you. You seem to all really enjoy it, so we're just going to kind of keep on doing it. So again, patreon.com/haplessheroes. Check it out, see if it's worth your money, and you know, we appreciate it.
And if you like us right now, you like us, Sally Field, and the whole deal, I want you and your little rascal of a best friend to fake your own deaths and then hide in the rafters of your funerals and at the perfect point in the funeral, jump down and tell everybody to listen to our podcast.
Doable, unethical, but doable. And with that, everybody, outroing my cast once more. We've had John.
Yep.
Yeah, I surprised him. I got him first.
You know what I think you got him with was usually it's John as.
Yeah.
No, we've had John as John.
John. Yeah. I don't say my catchphrase now, I guess. On to the next one.
Oh, wow. Until next time has been put in the vault. That's it. We're not getting it anymore. Phil as Phil.
I had a Hedrick outro.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, that's even better. That's even better.
Yeah, you can find me at hedrickshead.notarealpodcast.com. Again, that is not a real podcast.
Zach as Zach.
I was actually playing a character named Freddy Two Hands.
I see. Cool. Nicole as Nicole?
Until next time.
Oh! My boy didn't trademark that shit.
Yoink.
Mike as Mike.
It's been fun.
And Dave as Dave.
The hardest role I've ever played.
And I'm Francesco playing Francesco. We will see you next time for our mailbag episode. Bye-bye now.
Stay tuned.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. So long.